My name is Layla, and before you judge my story, I need you to listen until the end. Because everything I am about to tell you happened in one of the most dangerous places in the world for someone like me. I was 17 years old when my father discovered that my twin sister Miriam and I were no longer Muslims. That night, he dragged us into the basement of our house in Saudi Arabia, locked the door, and opened the water pipes to leave us there to die. As the water rose to our chest, I believed we were living our final minutes, but in the middle of that freezing darkness, when no one else could hear us, Jesus entered where no human being would enter. This is the story of the death that never happened, and the light that transformed even the heart of the man who tried to kill us. And to begin, check if you are already subscribed, like the video, and tell me where you are watching from. Because this story is going to move you. When I close my eyes, I can still hear the sound of the water hitting the concrete walls. It is as if that night never ended inside me. It is strange to think that while many of you are probably watching this video safely, sitting on your couch, drinking your coffee, my twin sister Miriam and I were fighting for our lives in a cold, dark basement in Saudi Arabia. And it was not an accident. It was not a flood. It was our own father who had opened the pipes to leave us there until the water finished the job. I remember his voice echoing through the metal door, a voice I did not recognize as the man who raised us. "You died to me." Those words entered my chest like blades, but the final blow was the turning of the key locking the only exit we had. And in that instant, the silence felt as loud as a scream. The water began covering our feet slowly, then our ankles. With every second, it rose higher and higher, as if it were in a hurry to touch us. Miriam and I pounded on the door with every bit of strength we had. We called his name, begged for mercy. We prayed like we had never prayed in our entire lives. But the whole house seemed dead, drowned in a silence that only increased our despair. I remember looking at my sister's face, so identical to mine, and feeling a panic that could not fit inside my body. The icy water stole our sensation, but the fear, that burned. And even then, there was something heavier in that basement. The feeling that everything we were, everything we had lived, everything we believed, was falling apart right there. What I did not know yet was that in that same basement where we expected to die, God was about to begin something that would change not only our story, but our Father's, and the stories of people we never imagined we would reach. Before reaching the depth of that night, you need to understand where we came from, because nothing that happened would make sense if you did not feel at least a little of the weight we carried since childhood. I grew up with Miriam in Al-Khatif, a hot, conservative city where every street felt like a reminder that our life did not belong to us. In our home, every small gesture was controlled. Every word had a time and a place. For as long as I can remember, the routine was the same. Wake up before sunrise, kneel for the mandatory prayers, repeat the verses our Father taught us, and complete our tasks in absolute silence. Silence. That was the language all the women in the house spoke. My mother barely had a voice. I never saw her choose her clothes. I never saw her say no. I never saw her walk without asking for permission. She was like a shadow behind my father, always hidden beneath layers of black fabric. He, Hassan al-Nouri, lived for honor, for rules, for never being seen as someone who failed before his faith. To him, Miriam and I were living displays of his religious zeal. Our gestures had to be perfect. Our clothes had to cover everything. Our eyes always lowered. In our home, no one spoke about feelings, doubts, dreams. None of that mattered. There was only obedience, discipline, and fear. But even living inside that rigid mold, there was something in me that could never fully fit. I do not know if it was because Miriam and I were twins and always felt everything in an amplified way, but from very early on we sensed that something was missing. We followed every rule, every prayer, every correct gesture, but an emptiness always followed us as if it were part of our skin. I tried to push those thoughts away, because we were taught that any doubt was demonic influence, and I did not want to be seen as someone weak in faith. But at night, under the blankets, when the house finally grew silent and only the trapped breaths remained in the walls, Miriam and I whispered things we would never have the courage to say out loud during the day. It was there, in that shared darkness, that she asked me for the first time, "Layla, why, if Allah is so great, do I feel so alone?" That question entered me like a muffled thunder, because I had felt that for years, but never had the courage to admit it even to myself. After that night, something changed. Not in an explosive way, but like a small crack in a wall. It begins invisible, but it grows. Miriam and I became more observant, more critical, more attentive to what we were told and to what we were never given answers for. And the more we tried to understand, the more we realized that our faith was made of commandments but not peace. There were rules, but no comfort. There were prohibitions, but no love. And it was in that state of silent restlessness that something unexpected happened, something so simple it could have gone unnoticed, but that God used as the first step to change everything. I remember the day perfectly. A classmate lent Miriam a tablet to finish a school assignment. It was supposed to be just that, an assignment, but when she opened the browser, a video was already loaded on the screen. The title, in Arabic, read, "How I Met Isa in a Dream." Isa, Jesus. Not the Jesus of the Bible that Christians know, but the version we had learned. Just a prophet, secondary, distant. I approached the screen, holding my breath, as if any sudden movement could make it disappear. We put on a single earphone, sharing it between us as if it were something sacred. The woman in the video spoke with a sweetness I had never heard in my life. She said that Isa had appeared to her saying, "I love you." And when she spoke those words, I felt something rise in my chest, as if someone had turned on a light inside me. I looked at Miriam and saw that she was feeling the same. It was impossible to deny. It was impossible to ignore. We watched it once, then again, and again. We didn't say a word, but our eyes said it all. Something had happened there. After that video, we couldn't go back to being the same. It was as if we had breathed fresh air for the first time in our lives, and for the first time, we felt a kind of courage we had never known before. We started secretly researching, who is Jesus in the Bible? Why does Isa appear in dreams? Former Muslims who encountered Jesus. That's how we discovered stories of people who left everything behind because of a real encounter with Jesus. They spoke of peace, always peace. A peace that didn't come from rituals, but from relationship. And that deeply moved me and Miriam. We began to pray softly, almost voicelessly, afraid that the air would betray us. And we said, "Jesus, if you are real, show us." It was the first genuine prayer I ever made in my life. And he answered even before I understood how to pray. The first time was with me. I was sleeping when I found myself in a desert, alone, the sun burning the white sand. I called out to someone I didn't know, and no one answered. Till, in the distance, I saw a man dressed in white walking towards me. I couldn't see his face, but there was something in his presence that made my heart kneel before my knees even touched the ground. He didn't say a word. He just extended his hand to me. And when I touched it, I felt as if living water, warm and clean, had run through my entire body. I woke up in tears, as if I had just returned from another world. When I told Miriam, she turned white, because she was also dreaming. Not exactly the same dream, but always with light, peace, a feeling of protection. She said, "Layla, I think it's him." And I knew it was. From then on, nothing inside us was the same anymore. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't curiosity. It was as if we had found air after a lifetime of living without breathing. It was as if we had found someone. And it was at that moment, when everything began to change within us, that the danger also began to grow around us, silent, inevitable, and ready to swallow us whole. I didn't know that the hunger for truth could hurt so much, and at the same time heal so much. But that's exactly how it all began when we first encountered the Bible. It was late at night, the whole house silent as a frozen desert, that kind of silence that not only envelops, but watches over. Miriam was sitting on the floor, with the tablet hidden between her legs, and when she finally managed to access the Arabic version of the scriptures, her heart pounded so hard I could have sworn I could hear it from here. I knelt beside her on the cold floor, and I remember how the touch of the marble felt even colder at that moment, as if the floor itself knew we were entering forbidden territory. When the first page opened, I almost lost my breath. It wasn't like the harsh, distant text we were used to. There was something alive there, something that seemed to listen to us as we read. The first sentence that really struck me was about love. Love, such a simple word, but one I had never seen written that way, as if it were a direct invitation to our wounded hearts. Then came forgiveness, then peace, and with each new line I felt as if someone was placing a warm blanket over the coldest parts of my soul. We both trembled, not from fear, but from something that seemed to be presence. From that night on, reading the Bible became our air. Kneeling on the cold floor, with the curtains drawn, the tablet hidden among pillows and old clothes, we read in silence and let Jesus' words mend something inside us that I didn't even know needed mending. And the more we read, the more we realized that our hands didn't want to let go of those pages. Miriam began writing verses on tiny pieces of paper, folding them so many times they looked like seeds. We kept everything inside an old perfume box, hidden at the back of the closet, behind handkerchiefs that no one touched. It was our secret ark, our little flame protected from the wind. Our fasts began without planning. It was something natural, something that flowed from within us, as if our soul were saying, "I want more of him." We fasted for short periods, without announcing it, without planning. We just did it. It was funny, because for the first time in our lives, a fast wasn't a religious obligation. It was desire. It was relationship. It was love. And within this shared secret, our faith grew silently, like a fire hidden beneath embers. No one saw the glow, but we felt the warmth. And that warmth gave us strength to face increasingly difficult days, because it didn't take long for danger to approach. My father, Hassan, always had a keen eye for discipline, but he had never paid as much attention to us as he did during that period. He began to notice small things: our quietness during the day, the fact that we went up to our rooms earlier, the prolonged silence after the house fell asleep, and even the subtle gleam that an attentive mother might call hope, but which he interpreted as a deviation. He didn't understand that that gleam came from something that no rule could control. Sometimes our bedroom door would open without warning, and we would both hold our breath as if the air itself might betray us. He would move the pillows, rearrange small objects, stare at the bookshelf for long seconds. Each unexpected visit left our hands cold. When he asked, "What are you two doing up here so early?" I felt my throat tighten. Miriam always answered with a small, almost invisible smile. "We're studying." He never seemed convinced. Then he started checking our cell phones, going through folders, searching history, opening photos. That's when I realized we were being monitored. Every step, every gesture, tension became a constant companion. And even so, we couldn't stop seeking Jesus. The hunger was greater than the fear. And that's something difficult to explain to someone who has never had a true encounter with God. It's as if the soul recognizes an ancient, familiar voice and runs to it, even if the feet tremble. One night, we overheard Hassan telling our mother about a distant cousin. "She abandoned Islam," he said in a heavy voice, "and died cursed." He spoke as if telling a cautionary tale, a cruel warning about the fate of those who dare to question. I felt a chill run down my spine. Miriam placed her hand on mine under the table and squeezed. Not because of the story, but because we knew that threat wasn't just a narrative. It was a warning. That's when we decided to burn some of our notes. We tore up handwritten verses, small excerpts we had copied with such care. Miriam cried as we threw the papers into the small kitchen incinerator, extinguishing with fire that which had given us life. But we knew that if it found anything, it would be worse. We kept only a few verses inside the perfume box, the most important ones, the ones we had memorized, the ones that were already more inside us than inside the paper. But a piece escaped. I will never forget the sound of the scream Hassan let out when he found that fragment. I was in the room, combing my hair, when I heard his voice explode in a roar that didn't sound human. He entered the room holding the piece of paper as if it were a living snake. On the paper was written the verse we had copied together days before: "I am the way, the truth, and the life." When I read it from afar, my heart sank. Miriam paled instantly. He approached, pointing at the paper as an accusation, his eyes filled with a mixture I could never describe. Hate, yes, but also fear, despair, shame. "What is this?" he shouted. We didn't answer. We didn't know what to say. There was no possible excuse, no way to deny it. He was consumed by such intense fury that it seemed the whole room trembled with his footsteps. "You are dead to me," he said. Words that ended with a sound of breaking stone. Our mother was behind him, her hand over her mouth, as if trying to stifle her own screams. But she didn't speak. She never spoke. He grabbed our arms and dragged us down the hallway. I can still feel his fingers closing on my wrist, not just forcefully, but with desperate conviction, as if he were fulfilling a sacred duty. The door leading to the basement always gave me chills, but that day it felt like a portal to the end. He pushed us down the stairs and I fell to my knees, scraping my skin on the wooden planks. Miriam fell beside me, trying to get up. The last sound we heard before the door closed was him saying he would cleanse the dishonor. And then, the key turned. When the water began to flood the basement, I knew this wasn't a test. This was the final plan. First it touched our feet, cold as metal, then our ankles, then it rose a little higher. The sound of the water filling the space was almost hypnotic, as if the basement itself were breathing slowly and cruelly. We screamed, prayed, begged, but the only sound we received in response was the relentless dripping of water and the absolute silence coming from upstairs. The basement looked like a tomb. The small lamp high on the wall flickered, as if deciding whether to turn off or not. Each time it flickered, I felt my heart stop. When it finally went out completely, Miriam grabbed my arm and said, "Layla, I think we're going to die here." But I couldn't answer. My whole body was trembling, and the water seemed heavier with each passing minute. And then, something happened. I was trembling, on the verge of completely collapsing, when an impossible sensation began to fill the air. I don't have the perfect words to describe it, but I'll try. It was as if the air itself had changed temperature, as if an invisible breeze had entered, and for the first time the water didn't seem so cold. It seemed lukewarm, and then I felt it. A presence, strong, yet gentle, unwavering, yet kind, and a voice within me, not in my ears, but deep within me, said, "Do not fear, I am here." I turned to Miriam and realized from her eyes that she had heard it too. The whole atmosphere seemed different. The darkness was no longer suffocating. It was almost welcoming. We had visions, not dreams, not imagination, but visions as real as the concrete beneath our feet. We saw fields of light, freedom, and the man in white walking toward us again. In an instant, the basement ceased to be a prison and became a sacred place. Meanwhile, in the house above our heads, something else was also happening. My father tried to sleep, but it was as if heaven itself had decided to shake his soul. He saw lights, faces, disturbing dreams. He saw me and Miriam, not crying, but shining. He heard chants that didn't come from mosques. He tried to recite words he had known since childhood, but his voice faltered, as if the air refused to cooperate. And then, something else happened. Tired, confused, lost within himself, he ended up watching videos that appeared on his cell phone. And one of them was a video of Charlie Kirk talking about faith, freedom, Jesus, truth, family, and spiritual transformation. My father had never heard anyone speak with such conviction about God in a way so different from what he knew, and that opened the first crack inside him. That's how the Holy Spirit entered a heart I thought impossible to reach. And when that light finally pierced through his hardness, he fell to his knees. For the first time in his life, he truly wept. Not tears of anger, but of regret, pain, and love. He ran to the basement, opened the door, and when the light from the house entered, he saw us floating, enveloped in that impossible peace. He broke down and said, "Forgive me." And at that moment, with the water still around our legs, I replied, "We belong to Jesus." He didn't stand up to shout. He didn't raise his hand. He trembled and surrendered. And it was there, in that unlikely encounter between water, light, and regret, that our story changed forever. But it's not over yet. After that night in the basement, that night when death tried to enter, but the presence of Jesus came first, our house was never the same again. It didn't happen suddenly, like in movies. It was silent. It was almost imperceptible to the naked eye. But I felt, inside me, that something spiritual, profound, true, and impossible to contain was growing there, exactly in the same place where fear had always reigned. The transformation began like a breath, but soon became a constant wind touching every corner of the house. Miriam and I remained in the basement, no longer locked up, but still isolated, as if our parents didn't quite know what to do with us after everything that had happened. But now, the atmosphere no longer felt like a punishment. It was almost an altar. The light filtering through the cracks in the floorboards seemed brighter, and even the air had a different smell. Miriam said that, since her encounter with Jesus in there, she felt the basement as a place of prayer, a place of healing, a place touched by the very presence of God. And I felt the same. It was strange to think that the place where we almost lost our lives would be the same place where we truly began to live. It was there that I began to notice signs of change within our family. My mother, for example, that quiet, almost invisible woman within her own home, began to act unexpectedly. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but on the first morning after we were allowed to go upstairs again, I found a small note on my pillow, made of fabric folded twice. I slowly opened it and saw a tiny cross sewn by hand. It was made with white thread on a neutral-colored cloth. No words, no written note, no explanation, just that cross. I looked at Miriam, and she had received an identical one. It made my eyes burn. It was as if my mother was saying something she couldn't say aloud, a hidden way of saying, I know what happened. I saw it. I believe it, even if I can't admit it. That cross became my treasure. I held that small piece of fabric as if I were holding God's own love. My father, on the other hand, had become a completely different man. It's difficult to explain to someone who didn't live with us, someone who didn't see the weight in his gaze for years, the rigidity, the coldness, the hardness. Seeing that man sit alone in the corner of the room, his head in his hands, crying while trying to pray, was almost impossible to process. He no longer called us harsh names. He didn't avoid us. He didn't maintain the heavy posture he used as an emotional shield. He cried when he thought no one was looking. He cried while murmuring incoherent words, trying to find God amidst the guilt he felt. And I realized that somehow, Jesus was working in him in a way as profound as he had worked in us. My younger brother, Kareem, didn't fully understand what had happened, but he sensed a light within us that hadn't existed before. One afternoon, he appeared at the basement door, his eyes curious and his voice soft. "Are you angels?" he asked, as if asking a forbidden question. I knelt before him, held his small hand, and said, "No, Kareem, we are just your sisters." But Jesus was here. He looked at me as if trying to comprehend the impossible. And then he did something no child in our family had ever done. He asked to pray with us. It was such a pure, simple, and powerful moment. 3 people kneeling on the floor of a makeshift basement, seeking the presence of the living God. There, I felt that something enormous was beginning, and I had no idea of the magnitude of the story that was about to unfold around us. The first signs came almost imperceptibly. Small folded sheets of paper appeared on the doorstep. At first, we thought it was some message left by my father or mother, but we soon realized it wasn't. The handwriting was different, softer, younger. The first simply said, "I saw the light." The second brought something even more shocking. "I want to know more." Miriam and I looked at each other, our hearts pounding as if we were hearing a direct call from God. We didn't know who had left it, but it was impossible to ignore. We began to respond, never writing our names, never giving details, never announcing anything that could expose us, just small portions of hope. Carefully written passages from the Bible, folded so many times that they became small, discrete squares, verses about peace, about love, about freedom, about Jesus. We placed them under a stone near the gate, where we knew the person would return. We didn't know who it was, but we knew why they were coming. And then something happened that sealed everything. Neighborhood children, Children who had never paid any attention to us before began leaving small, rounded stones with strange markings, a cross made of scratches, a straight line with two curves, like a fish, a rudimentary heart made with small hands. It was as if the entire street had begun to breathe the same air we had breathed since our encounter in the basement. The neighborhood was silent on the outside, but spiritually ablaze on the inside. Without realizing it, Miriam and I became leaders of a movement we never planned to start. A secret revival, a silent spiritual awakening, hidden from everyone's view, but alive in every note, every stone, every shy glance of those seeking something beyond the rules. It was as if God had lit a spark in the basement of our house, and it was spreading through the alleys, through the windows, through the lives that crossed ours. But the brighter the light, the bigger the shadow that tries to extinguish it. One day, my father opened the basement door, his face pale. My stomach sank even before he spoke. He approached slowly, as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, and said in a trembling voice, "There's a government man looking for answers." My heart raced. I looked at Miriam and saw the fear in her eyes too. "He asked about you," my father continued. "He asked if you're involved with Christians." I felt an instant weakness in my legs. This wasn't a rumor. It wasn't an empty threat. It was real. And in that country, that meant danger for all of us. Hassan took a deep breath, looked at us with a mixture of pain and courage, and said the words I never imagined hearing from him. "You need to run." He didn't say it like a commander. He said it like a father trying to save his daughters, even if it cost him everything he knew. My heart broke when I heard that. The fear intensified, but along with it came a certainty. God was opening a way, even if that way was through the night, and it was that night that our escape began. We were hiding in the living room, with the lights off, when we heard 3 soft knocks on the back door. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It was a Christian woman, dressed in black from head to toe, only her eyes visible, shining with determination. She introduced herself with a simple gesture, hand over her chest, and motioned for us to follow. My father was behind her, and when our eyes met, something inside me broke. That would be our last look for a long time. We walked through the dark alleyways, holding each other's hands, each step carrying a piece of our lives that we were leaving behind. The city seemed different at night. Silent, dangerous, full of shadows. When we reached the car parked behind an old wall, 2 secret Christians greeted us. Their eyes held a quiet strength, like those who know the price of faith and yet choose to carry it. The journey we took afterward was endless. We crossed deserts under the moon, traversed clandestine borders, stopped at houses so small they seemed invisible from a distance. But at each stop, someone was praying for us, someone who knew Jesus, someone who risked their own life so that ours might be saved. I had never known this kind of love before. Sacrificial love, love that gives, even without knowing if it will receive anything in return. Love that comes from heaven. When we finally arrived at our destination, a simple house with boarded-up windows and flickering candlelight, I felt something inside me stir. There were 6 people there, 6 believers hidden away, kneeling, waiting for us. When we told them everything that had happened, each of them wept, not tears of despair, but of gratitude. They embraced us as if we were family, and for the first time in my life, I raised my hands without fear. It was as if my heart said, "This is my home," and it didn't stop there. In the following months, our testimony began to spread, not because we wanted fame, not because we announced our names, but because Jesus had done something so great that it could no longer be contained within 4 walls. Small churches began to spring up in unlikely places: schools, public restrooms, abandoned basements, tents in the desert. We received messages from Christians in Yemen, Oman, and Jordan. They didn't call us Layla and Miriam. They wrote, "We are the followers of the twins." I never understood why God chose 2 ordinary girls from a family crushed by fear to ignite such a great flame. But he did. And that flame began to ignite hearts in places where light seemed impossible. One day, during a secret meeting, a leader entered with an envelope in his hands. I noticed he was emotional. He opened it and began to read a letter written in simple Arabic. The word said, "I saw the man in white, and he forgave me." My whole body froze. The leader looked up and said, "It's from your father." I broke down, unable to control my tears. He was now secretly praying to Jesus. He had found the same love that he found in us. And there, in the middle of that small room lit by candles, I realized that the gospel had triumphed within the house where before there had only been fear. A God who finds two girls in a dark basement. He can find anyone, anywhere. And if he did it for us, he can do it for you right now. When I look back at everything I've been through, it still seems impossible that I'm here, breathing, talking to you, telling a story that had every reason to end tragically. I never imagined that the girl trembling in a dark basement, believing it would be her last night, would become a living witness that Jesus enters exactly where no one else can. I never imagined that my father's hatred would turn into repentance, that my mother's shame would turn into silent faith, or that two hidden girls would be used to ignite a secret movement that would cross borders. But that is why I say, with all the certainty of my heart, Jesus never gets addresses wrong. He knows exactly where to find those who cry out to him. If he found two twin sisters hidden in the middle of the desert, suffering, without hope, he can find you right now, wherever you are. It doesn't matter your past, your pain, your mistakes, your fears. He crosses walls that no one sees, breaks chains that no one understands, and brings light where only darkness existed. And if this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel right now so that more people can be reached. Leave a like, because this helps YouTube deliver this testimony to other people who need to hear it. And if you've stayed with me this far, and I know that those who make it to the end have a sensitive heart, write in the comments, "I love Jesus, that's all." I want to see how many hearts God is touching through this story. And now, before you leave, watch the next video that's appearing on the screen. In it, I'm going to tell you what happened after a Jordanian prince set on fire for reading the Bible until a miracle happened. You can't miss it.